What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. Today I'm here with Randy Blaukat, and we're going to be talking about whether it matters if you have a lot of fishing experience to be a good fisherman, or if you can be a good fisherman with limited experience on the water. So it should be a really interesting topic today. Randy, how's everything been going?
Doing good, man. How's it going there, Johnny?
It's great. I'm reading through some of these comments. We're a little bit late getting on here, guys. Apologize. Timo's giving me crap about the chores for my wife. And then B. Watson says, I guess Randy was in the middle of a Pong game on your computer while you're trying to get dialed up. So,
Well, I'm still a work in progress. Johnny's trying to instruct me on all this modern technology, and it's slow going, but we're making progress a little bit every week, a little bit better.
oh, yeah. No, you're doing great, Randy. And just appreciate you taking the time to keep it going. PK says, Randy must be on DSL. Got that dial up internet. Perfect. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, the router, I've got a Wi-Fi extender coming in Friday, but our router is on the other side of the house from where I'm set up here in my office. So sometimes we got a little bit of a weak signal here.
Yeah, well, no worries. And Living Missouri's Outdoors says, congratulations on the Jewel Baits partnership. Appreciate that, guys. I know say on social media that I'm going to be partnering with Jewel Baits, and we're actually working on developing a brand new offshore bait. I talked about last week in the live stream. I said we'd have it ready by yesterday, but we had some just more stuff to get taken care of with all the production and all of the rollout and making sure we do everything right. And so we've actually squared away everything now, and we're going to be releasing the bait on Friday at 11 p.m. on jewelbait.com. And I'll be posting this on social media. I'll be making a video about the bait, and it's an awesome bait. Randy's fished with it. He's caught some really nice fish with it. I've been fishing with it now for like 9 months, and I put a ton of effort into it. And so we're not going to spill the beans on what it is, but trust us, it's a good bait. Would you agree, Randy?
Oh, definitely. So it's sort of it's got some modifications of existing things on a lure category that I've never seen before, and it really makes a lot of difference as far as the efficiency of how you can fish that bait, the hookups ratio, and the bites too. So it's I'm pretty excited to be using it moving forward.
Yeah, super excited about that. And then have a lot of other stuff coming up too, guys. We'll talk about a little bit later in the stream. I don't want to dive into everything right here at the start, but we saw from Bassman says that we got Rick Clunn. There is going to be some stuff that I'm actually going to be doing with Rick Clunn, and I'm posting a video of an interview I did with him this upcoming Thursday, so you'll be able to watch me talk with Rick for about half an hour. And so I'm kind of basically building a team of all of the bass fishing legends with Randy and Rick and some other guys to help enlighten as many people as I can about their knowledge, and trying to take some of the modern techniques and modern skills that I have, combining it with some of the experienced long standing techniques, and hopefully elevating the fishing game to make you guys better, and even maybe come up with some new tactics in general. So I really like what we're doing here, Randy. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, man. I am so excited to be doing this. It's like, every morning I get up and I'm just really, really pumped up on the opportunities that we have, to teach and share information. And I just really like bouncing ideas off of you, when we're fishing together and we're talking, because it's so easy in bass fishing to get stuck in a rut. Especially if you've been doing it as long as I have. So being able to bounce off ideas with a from a different perspective is it's how you keep growing as an angler. And if you don't do that, if you don't share ideas and have like respectful critical debates with people on fishing, you're never going to elevate your performance to a higher level.
Completely agree. And there's a bunch of guys here, Randy, they're saying they're watching YouTube channel and they love it. If you guys haven't seen Randy's YouTube channel, it's the Innovative Angler, correct, Randy? Is that the
Intuitive?
or intuitive angler? And
The intuitive angler.
yeah, intuitive angler. And it's I'll link it down in the description of this video, and it's also on Randy's social media at Blaukat Randy or at Randy Blaukat Professional Angler. And everyone says that they are loving the videos, and they like the video that you did too with the summer square bill stuff. And so we're going to be doing a lot more content in collaboration with Randy and myself in the boat. Randy's going to be sharing a bunch of his kind of secret tour level techniques that he's developed over 30 years of being on the tour, and we'll also be fishing together, bouncing ideas off each other. So it's all really great stuff, and I'm super excited to bring all that content to you guys. And one thing that we actually wanted to address at the beginning of this stream is, and can you hear me, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay, you're still there. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. Looks like your screen is frozen on my end, but just make sure we can see you. But
yeah, I can. You're looking fine here.
Cool. So there was some comments on the last stream, and we know that there's always that vocal minority that maybe has different opinions and stuff like that. And I just wanted to address this comment because I've heard grumblings of this before, and I want to just kind of read the comment to you guys and let Randy have a chance to react to it so that there's not any misunderstandings about what's going on with me and Randy on the stream and stuff like that. So I'm going to have to clean up this comments a little bit. I'm not going to say who it's from, but basically the guy wrote, "Waiting for Randy to have enough of Johnny's one-upping and freak the F out. I cringe every time Randy finishes talking about his own approach, and then Johnny says, 'See, that's really interesting because,' and then proceeds to say the exact opposite of what Randy says. Not saying Johnny is wrong, but to me, it just seems like he is constantly crapping on Randy." So that is kind of something that I've been a little bit worried about with doing streams with, like a bass fishing legend like Randy, is that whenever I have an opinion, it might seem like I'm contradicting Randy, which is completely not the case. What basically I'm trying to do is, whenever Randy's giving his examples of what he does, I try to give a different perspective of what I like to do when I'm fishing, and a lot of times I'm just trying to come up with something to say too live on air, so I maybe don't, give the credit to Randy saying, "Randy, that's a great opinion, I completely agree." And so sometimes I miss out on that. But Randy, have you ever got to the point where you're going to freak the F out on me before?
No, I hadn't got to that point yet. And when it comes to bass fishing, me learning about fishing, I don't have any ego whatsoever. So if a 5-year-old kid can give me good information that I can use for my fishing, I'm going to take it. And no, I have never felt like that. And I think a lot of it that just comes with, people think that, when you're young, I mean, people tend, they if you're confident in your technique and your ability, they sometimes equate that for being cocky a little bit. But I don't feel like that at all. And like I said, if you look back at some of the younger anglers, like we talked about Kevin Van Dam and Jacob Wheeler, winning the Bassmasters Classic and the Forest Food Cup when they're 21 years old with very little experience. You look at those anglers and say, man, I can learn so much from them. They're so good at that age. And that's the same with yourself. Just because, you haven't chose to pursue tournament fishing, that doesn't take away anything from your ability to learn and to teach other anglers to do it. I'll take it. Here's a prime example. Look at Bobby Jones, the golfer back in the early 1900s. He won everything on the amateur level. I mean, he never turned professional, and he was probably one of the greatest golfers of all time that never turned professional. So you don't have to fish tournaments just like yourself to be able to not only teach anglers, but to be just a world-class angler all the way around, as far as being able to assimilate information and execute that information on the water. So one of the things that I would say about that is that, don't put any prejudices or bias on age. It doesn't make any difference if an angler is 10 years old or if it's 90 years old. Everybody out there has abilities uniquely their own that, one day they may be able to beat any other angler out there, and vice versa. So short answer is no, that's not how I feel at all. I mean, I love bouncing ideas off you, sharing information, and I've learned so much just talking to you about fishing the last 3 or 4 months than I have in the past 5 or 6 years. Easy, simply because you've opened my eyes to a lot of different techniques in fishing that I just closed myself off to. So, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to flip out on you. No.
Well, I appreciate that, Randy. And, I've learned a ton from Randy as well, just from the mental side of fishing and also a lot of the shallow water applications. And for me, I'm always trying to improve myself just like Randy. And I don't try to focus on one specific technique or one specific approach and then ignore everything else, or think that, hey, the only person who can teach me how to become a better fisherman is a tour level professional. There are a ton of guys, they're just my friends that I fish with. They might fish one time a month and they barely can cast a bait caster, but they can go out and they can catch them in a unique way that I've never heard about before, and I can learn from that and expand on it and take that information to become a better angler. And so even if the angler isn't super experienced, they can still figure out small techniques and small ways to catch fish on a specific lake in a specific time of the year. What I think that really separates the long established tour professionals and the pros is that they are able to adapt to any lake, any conditions, and take their experience and push that forward. Where a lot of the local guys, there's a lot of guys who can go and win a BFL or win a local tournament, but they could never even compete at all on the professional tour level, not even close, or even the open level. But they know how to go catch fish, let's say, on Lake Hartwell in March really well, because they have these honey holes that they've caught them on. And you can still learn a ton from that person and figure out how they're doing that. But then if you're going to be a professional, you need to take in how do you catch them in March, but also how do you catch them on Hartwell in May, in August, in December, in September. And then how do you do that on every other lake across the entire country? And so that's what I try to do, at least on this stream, guys, is give you my perspective, because while I might not be a tour professional and I might not be the best fisherman in the world, and I never have claimed that or even think that, what I like to share with you guys is at least how I'm successful catching fish, because even if I'm not on the tour, if I'm catching 3 and 4 pound bass consistently on a certain pattern, a certain technique, I feel like that's valuable to anybody, even like a tour professional like Randy, because I've figured that one pattern out. Can I do that across the country on every lake and tour around the country and fish professionally? Probably not, because I don't have the experience in all that. And so hopefully that kind of makes sense and kind of gives a different perspective on what we're doing here. And I am, again, super grateful for Randy to partner up with me and Fish the Moment. And he's actually going to be working with me hand in hand, guys, for basically going forward. We're making videos together, doing live streams together. We are a team. It's the two of us are Fish the Moment. It's not just Johnny is Fish the Moment anymore. So just want to make that all clear. Anything else to add there, Randy?
Yeah, one thing I'll say about that, you mentioned about your friends, learning stuff from them. It's just like Johnny and I went out last week. We were at Table Rock Lake, and he was, basically showing me a lot of position. And tune that to the extent that I had never even capitalized on that. Why I may be able to run up the river and understand fish positioning and movement and behavior in shallow water that takes years of experience. To be able to see you do that in real time on the grass was a big deal.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit there. Basically, I think, could you just kind of give a quick summary of that again, Randy? You were cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, there's a little bit of lag.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me open the door just a little bit. Just 1 second, guys.
No problem. Guys, appreciate you guys bearing with us through technical difficulties, working remote and doing all this stuff. You guys know now probably with all the stuff. There you go.
Okay, what I was saying is you made a comment about learning from your friends that don't fish that much. That's the thing about it. It's just like a lot of the information that you get and learn from in bass fishing has to do with the haphazard. It has to do with stuff that like maybe just a random coincidence or a chance encounter or an accident or a mistake. That's how you learn a lot from maybe anglers that don't have much experience. But Johnny and I went fishing at Table Rock Lake last week, and he was showing me basically, how to catch these deep water fish on down imaging and side imaging. And it's something that obviously that, you probably had, 5 or 6 years of experience on the deep water side imaging, down imaging, but you have assimilated so much information about those deep water fish movements by being able to understand and read your electronics. That's something that that's a type of experience that you can get quickly because you can do it like in real time. But for me, for example, if I like run up the river and I'm fishing 3 foot of water, flipping bushes or something like that, there's a technique to understand fish positioning and fish movement and fish behavior and fish personalities that may have taken me decades to learn, because each one of those would change under different situations. So some techniques that you have in fishing take years and years and years and decades to master. Why some techniques, like the deep water fishing, that information you can access a little bit quicker and become really efficient at it.
And I think that's the big deal with a lot of the up and coming anglers that have come up and have just dominated. With like Jacob Wheeler, you have Jordan Lee, you have a lot of these guys that are taking over the sport, and they've done that a lot by leveraging their electronics. Now, obviously, Jacob Wheeler, Jordan Lee, they have been fishing tournaments. Like I used to fish tournaments against Jacob. I've known Jacob since he came up to me at a casting kids competition when I was like 9 or 11 years old, something like that. I think he was like 15. And so I've known Jacob since he was like 15 years old. And we fished together before. He stayed at my house several times. Like, I know Jacob really well. And basically, he has been fishing tournaments and fishing and honing his skills since he was at a very, very young age. And he's been doing it at a high level at a young age. And so guys who are, let's say now in their mid-20s to their 30s, they've been fishing at high-level tournament competition against their local federation clubs and BFLs and open stuff like that since they were 16. So now they have 10, 15 years of high level tournament experience. And like even myself, I've been fishing tournaments since I was 9 years old, and I've been fishing adult tournaments like the Fishers of Men is like in a team tournament, stuff like that, since I was 11. So I have now 14 years of tournament experience and fishing experience at a competitive level. And for a lot of the really good anglers who are out there on the tour, a lot of them didn't start fishing really heavily, especially like getting really into it, until they were in their 20s. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yeah, exactly. And everybody has situation unique to their own as far as when they get started, and how quick they advance in the sport. But one story I'd like to share with that, as far as this whole experience versus uh, being young and creativity. In 1986, that was my first year on the Bassmaster circuit, the Bassmaster Invitationals. And to make a long story short, I didn't have much experience. I hadn't been outside the state of Missouri fishing really. I'd had decent success locally, but not great success. I'd qualified for the All American, which was the high point. But anyway, when I started the circuit in 1986, I'd never been to any lakes that we went to across the country. And I did not know anything about these lakes. And I went to every one of these lakes blind, just completely, clueless on what to look for. But I just took with me things that I had learned from back home and tried to duplicate it on other lakes. And I was able to qualify for the Bassmasters Classic my first year, not really knowing anything about fishing, and doing better than a lot of these guys that had been fishing the circuit for years and years and years. But looking back in retrospect with that, the only reason that I qualified for the Classic, it wasn't because of my skills as an angler. I was, I was not that great of an angler at all, but my mind, I kept an open mind and a fresh perspective, and I was willing to try things that maybe a lot of people hadn't tried, and those things work. It's like people get so locked in to certain techniques year after year after year, and then they time goes by and they become veteran anglers, and they've stayed with those techniques and they haven't grown, and that's why they got passed by guys like myself in 1986, guys like Jacob Wheeler, and when he did it, and Kevin Van Dam back in the early 90s, that type of stuff. So it's been my uh, observation that, and I've talked to a lot of guys about, I talked to Clun about this, I've talked to different people. Experience cannot experience cannot compete with imagination and creativity when it comes to bass fishing, especially if you have a basic grasp of the sport and how to fish. It is by far more important than experience. And it doesn't make sense really. I mean, on the surface, and if you try to intellectualize it, it just doesn't make any sense. But it's the way it is for sure. You can't argue with the statistics on it.
And one thing that I've found that's been really interesting is, as I see this kind of curve with fishermen in terms of when a lot of fishermen start out tournament fishermen, or let's say they fish for maybe 4 or 5 years and then they start tournament fishing. A lot of times those guys in their first 2 or 3 years, they can hit it really hot and they start winning a lot of tournaments, finishing really high. And I feel like that's because when they start out, they know 2 or 3 techniques really well, and they go find the water that works for those techniques on any lake. They just fish with their confidence, and they know I can catch them on a jig, or I can catch them on a crankbait fishing down the bank. I'm going to go find how they catch them on a crankbait or a jig. And then at some point, you start getting more and more techniques under your belt. You start getting confidence in more and more techniques. And it's almost like you get overwhelmed by the number of techniques out there, and you spread yourself too thin. Oh, should I fish offshore? Should I fish shallow? Should I fish the clear water, the dirty water? And then at some point, you kind of like settle in, I guess, to techniques that work for you, that you have confidence in. And that's when I feel like a lot of guys like the Jacob Wheelers and like the Van Dams, they start to dominate. If you look at Van Dam, he was doing really well, winning Angler's Year and stuff in the 90s, but he didn't really start dominating until he hit that like 2005 to 2012 era. Same thing with Wheeler. He's dominating right now, but he wasn't super dominant the first 7-8 years. He was doing really well, but he's now like one of the top anglers in the world. And I think that at some point anglers get to a realization of where they are skilled, what they like to do, and they stick with that, and they just fine tune that to the best degree, kind of like a John Cox fishing up shallow or Jacob Wheeler fishing offshore. And then at some point, you almost get too past that where now you've got stuck in that groove and you're like, I'm going to be an offshore fisherman fishing this way. And then by the time you're 30 years on tour, you're too stuck in your ways and you don't adapt. And that's kind of like the life cycle of fishermen. So would you agree with that whole assessment, Randy?
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy with that. And everybody in fishing and life and whatever sport you want to look at, everybody has their time in the sun. They got their moment in the sun. And it's just like what you said. Normally, these guys that are hot starting out, they may have some isolated good events. Some people may start faster than others, but there's a period in an angler's career where basically the creativity, the experience, the intuition, the imagination, it all comes together. And normally that's sort of like when an angler is in their early 30s to late to maybe early 40s, maybe mid 40s. There's like a 10-year window there in professional fishing where everything just comes together. And then exactly what happens after that, it's like after an angler gets in their early to mid 40s, they start to get locked into those successes that they've had. If they've been really successful at certain techniques, like take, for example, Tommy Biffle and Denny Brower, they just flipped all the time and they dominated when they were in their 30s and early 40s. And they gradually sort of like faded out a little bit, not that they're not great anglers, because they're world-class anglers even today, but their level of domination never sustained itself. And I sort of think there's been no anglers out there that have transcended that sort of that rule. And I don't think that it's something that that is like a given. I don't think that like when an angler gets into their early 40s or mid 40s that they're destined to go downhill. But what happens is just like what you're talking about, Johnny, is that everybody gets so locked into what's worked for them, and they get knocked down from their confidence levels by some injustice in the sport or whatever. There's a combination of things that come together that basically hampers their performance. Now, one day, maybe there will be an angler emerge that just dominates all the way through their 70s. Maybe somebody that like never stops learning, and it's just everything is tied together in their life where they're constantly absorbing that information and they're able to execute it, and they're able to discern certain techniques over the other at the right time in the right spot. But so part of me sort of sees that one way, and then part of me just sort of says, hey, that's just part of the cycle of life. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. Just enjoy it. Enjoy your good events, enjoy your time in the sun, and enjoy your good moments before and after. I mean, because you can still have good moments, even if you're, some old grizzled fishermen later on in life. So, but yeah, I agree with your assessment on that completely.
I think that's super interesting concept though for a tour professional or for any fisherman is can you capture that like that 30 to 40 year like that 10-year period when you're your 30s to 40s, can you capture that and expand that and extend it? And it's almost like you have to, once you get out of your 30s and 40s, if you want to continue to be good, you almost have to start the whole process over again. You have to now relearn the new techniques, struggle through learning new techniques, and then get good again. And for an
Yeah,
average angler, that seems maybe like a tough process. What do you think there?
yeah. I'll give you a prime example of of the way that takes place because we got our Bassmaster Open at Oneida was canceled last week, but prior to that cancellation, I was trying to put together a game plan in my mind for that tournament going up there because I fished up north a lot. I understand northern smallmouth. I understand what it takes to catch them, and we're in the water. So I've got just a ton of experience on northern smallmouth waters. So in my game plan going up there, I told myself I am not going to fish a drop shot in that tournament, even though I know that that's going to be a strong technique. I know that I cannot go up there and throw a drop shot and compete against all these guys that are experts at drop shotters that are good with their side imaging or whatever. I can't do it. I cannot win that tournament drop shot, but I can win that tournament if I can get on, some type of a jerkbait bite, a topwater bite, a cranking bite, some type of a power fishing bite and things line up right, I could win that tournament or finish high. So my way of thinking, I automatically limited myself to a certain technique.
Hmm.
Now, whether that produces or not, it remains to be seen. But what happens is an angler like myself that has so much experience and I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, I can't afford to go up there and experiment with a drop shot against somebody that's an expert drop shotter, just like they can't compete with me if there's a jerkbait bite on there. Where somebody that's 25 years old like yourself, you may say, "Man, the drop shot's the deal up there. I'm gonna figure those fish out with the drop shot," and you don't have that limitation. So depending upon how it unfolds, that can be a positive or negative. And that's sort of how it always works out for me, anyway.
And there's a good comment here from Don. He says, I think he's speaking for himself. He says, "We as elderly anglers fish too many memories. Johnny and Randy are correct. We need to fish the moment. My 9-year-old grandson often outfishes me just because he just fishes." And I think that that's really a insightful comment from Don because I find myself doing that too. Like when I try to go to the lake, a lot of times I'll get stuck in. Like we tried to do that when we were on Table Rock the other day. We're like, we're gonna go catch fish on a hair jig, and I knew that last year I crushed them on a hair jig in July, and the conditions were set up what seemed to be in a similar way, and we couldn't catch him. And then you wanted to go catch him on a swim bait, and you tried to run that swim bait off history and didn't work. And we basically just had to scratch everything and just go fish the moment to go catch the fish. And I found myself doing that more and more, and I've realized that to fish the moment, what you need to do is you need to understand what all the different situations can play out in, what type of baits work in different situations with the wind, the clouds, and understanding bass behavior and fish behavior is way more important than having prior knowledge of, oh, they bite a hair jig in July on Table Rock. It's knowing how fish behave and then reacting to that is more important. That's at least what I've found. I think that's something that's missing in a lot of anglers fishing is that they get so focused on memories and what people have told them to do, what past events have been done. They don't just go up there and think, what are the fish doing today? What do the fish want? Not what I want, but what do the fish actually want?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that completely, Johnny. And that all goes back to the reason that most people can't fish in the moment and the reason that they get stuck and doing things is they let fear overtake them in their fishing. They're
Mm.
scared to make an adjustment because something's been working for them and they say, well, man, if I just stay with it, if I just commit to this, it's going to work. And it is a little bit intimidating to have to abandon something that's worked really well and just start fresh again. And that's what I'm saying, that if you let fear control your fishing, particularly in a tournament sense, you're never going to do good in a tournament because you have to have the ability to just drop everything that hadn't been working and just start from scratch, just start fresh again. And I remember I was fishing with Larry Nixon one time. We drew each other out in a tournament, and I've drawn Nixon, I've drawn Roland Martin, I've drawn Clunn, Hank Parker, all the top guys, and I always, when I drew them, I'd always quiz them, to death, on fishing, and and I asked Larry, and I asked all these guys the same question. I said, "What is the key to doing good in bass fishing? What is the main key to doing good in fishing, particularly tournaments?" And Larry goes, when you're fishing tournaments, you have to go out there and just fish like you don't give a crap. You don't, like, you just do not care what's going to happen.
Yep.
Because if you do that, then, like you said, basically Larry was telling me that, you fish easy. If you have an idea to try something different, you don't second guess it. You just put down what's not working and try something fresh, just like you're just out goofing around practicing. And he is so right on that. Yet, even though that's such a simple statement, it's so profound, yet it is so difficult to do. Like I said, fear dominates and controls us on some level. It doesn't matter who you are when it comes to fishing, that it's just really hard to transcend that. And particularly if you have a lot on the line, if you have a lot to lose, if you're setting good in the points, or if you're in a situation where you've got to make a check to get to the next one, or you got to pay your mortgage payment next month, and by catching fish, it makes it really hard, to not let fear control you. But yeah, to get back to your question, that's sort of got off a different tangent there, but I agree with what you're saying on that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple guys in the comments who are asking, what are your thoughts on Jacob Wheeler? Is he the next KVD? And one thing that I actually was listening to Bass Talk Live recently, and they did an analysis of, I think it was Ken Duke, he did an analysis of KVD's early career versus Jacob Wheeler's early career. And one thing that was fascinating to me is that I don't know, I don't really have a strong opinion. I think Jacob's an awesome angler. But a lot of people leave out Jordan Lee, who's actually in the thumbnail of this video, as one of the top anglers. And I think that with Jacob doing his YouTube channel and social media, he has a lot of hype going behind him. But Jordan Lee, he's literally the best fisherman I have ever seen in person. I fished with Jacob, but something about Jordan and his ability to process information, and I watched him fish my home lake in Central Arkansas when he was in college, and he was like 5 levels above any college angler. He's already won 2 Bassmaster Classics. He just won the Major League Fishing Angler of the Year title. He's won the Heavy Hitters event, which is kind of like the big event for this year. He's won several other Major League Fishing Tour events. He is on trajectory. If he was going to stay in bass and didn't switch over to Major League Fishing, he could have won 6 or 7 Classics at the rate he was going. And so I think that Jordan Lee is probably the most underrated angler out there, and he is just a hammer. And so, yeah, Jacob is awesome, but I would say that him and Jordan are neck and neck. And I don't know, maybe with this new AOY, I think maybe Jordan maybe edged him out a little bit. What do you think? What do you think about that, Randy?
Yeah, those Wheeler and Jordan Lee are definitely if they're not 1 and 2 in the sport, I don't know who is. They're arguably the top 2 anglers in the sport today, and that's sort of always been like. There's always been like 2 or 3 anglers that are just on a completely different level than other anglers. Their expectations are different. Their ability to understand and adapt to fishing is just completely on a different level. And I think that's what you're seeing with them right now. Like I said, they've got the youth behind them, yet they've got experience. They got everything going good in their lives. They've had, things unfold. They've had opportunities unfold for them that they've taken advantage of, and they've capitalized on those opportunities. And they're just better than everybody else. I mean, this same with any other sport. They're standouts, and they're at the top of the game right now.
Yeah, both of them are really good at fishing the moment. Like, literally, that is what they're great at. Jordan can catch him offshore. Jacob can catch him offshore. Jordan can catch him up shallow. Jacob can catch him up shallow. They can do both, and they're both really proficient at it. And they can switch between them seamlessly. And that's one thing that I find with the new group of anglers that makes them dominant is they can win shallow and win deep. That is something that very few people can say that they can do. Like, there's not that many anglers in the world who are equally skilled shallow versus offshore. There's always, like David Fritz was an offshore guru. He could catch him on deep dive and crankbait, but he never won a tournament when they would go up shallow flipping bushes and stuff. He was offshore. Same thing with Tommy Biffle. Yeah, he's won a couple, like on Fort Gibson. He won some quote unquote offshore tournaments on his Biffle bug, but he's been a flipper his whole life. But these new breed of anglers, they can do both, and I think that's one thing that's really cool with what we're doing, Randy. Is I'm definitely an offshore expert. I'm not going to claim that I'm very good at fishing up shallow. I can catch them up shallow. I grew up doing it, but it's not my like forte. But I'm really good offshore, and you're really good up shallow, and maybe you're not that great offshore. And so when we can combine our knowledge, we can literally teach people all the elements of fishing, which I think is so fascinating for our channel, at least.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, unless you just fish 300 days a year and you don't have any outside life, you don't have any family or whatever, it's hard for an angler to be a master at every technique, because that takes time, that takes commitment, that takes study. Even if you're not on the water, you have to just constantly be absorbed into fishing. And that's why it's so difficult to sustain that.
Yep.
And one thing I'll say one more thing about Wheeler and Jordan Lee is, like, everybody's heard the statement, success breeds success. This is particularly true in tournament fishing, because here's what I mean by it. Wheeler and Jordan Lee have won so much money in the sport. They both won, several $1 million in a short period of time.
Yep.
That they've created a situation for them that not only that takes your confidence to a different level, but they've completely eliminated the financial distraction from their fishing. And when you have the ability to do that, if you're in a situation where you've got to focus 100% on the fish and the fish movements and putting the fish in the boat, when you don't have that distraction, where you've been so successful in the sport that is not even that's not even in your mind, that frees your mind up to fish so much more loose, so much more free. It takes so much of the fear out of it. And when you take all those elements out of it, that allows you to reach those next levels. And I think that's what you've seen with them a lot.
Yeah. Now, I think it's going to be scary, too, because I think, like, right now, they're both really hot, like, on a hot streak with Anglers a Year winning tournaments. It's going to be fascinating to see who takes the next step, because I would say right now they're pretty much in line, like neck and neck in terms of accomplishments, a career achievement, stuff like that. And I mean, it's arguable either way depending on how you want to weight different stuff. But I think at this point, they're still only in their 20s. And so I think there's a really good chance that one of them is going to just outpace the other at this point. Like, I don't think they're both going to continue on the same trajectory. They might, but I think one of them is going to really step it up and even go to another gear. And I'm excited to see how they do that and what they do, because that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think one thing about that, when you talk about anglers that get on streaks, a lot of it has to do with scheduling, because some of these anglers that get on real hot streaks, like take, for example, Wheeler on the TVA lakes. I mean, Wheeler has won a bunch of big events offshore cranking during the post-spawn and early summer, which obviously it's one of his forte. He's a well-rounded angler, no doubt, but he is a master at, electronics and offshore fishing. So when you have a schedule lined up like that, and you have a couple events fall in your wheelhouse, that is when you can really win those big tournaments. It's just like I remember back in the late 90s, Clun won 2 or 3 big tournaments in a row because he got on a roll of events that we had a real strong shallow squarebill bite going on, and he rolled that over from tournament to tournament. And I've seen that happen over the years, where events just fall in certain anglers' wheelhouses. Not that it has to with those two guys, but, definitely has with Wheeler on some offshore fishing so far.
For sure. Awesome. Well, I'm going to take a quick break here, guys, and I want to share a few things with you about, let me pull this up here. Give me 1 second. I need to get this set up. Let me see here. I want to share with you guys a couple things about some stuff that Randy and I are working on here. Randy, I need to get this set up. Improv for like 30 seconds, Randy. I'm throwing you on the spot. Say something interesting.
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit about what Johnny and I have been doing. We're going to continue for the next, actually foreseeable future. We're going to be doing, several different videos a week. We're going to be going around to a lot of the lakes around here, Northwest Arkansas, Southwest Missouri, Northeast Oklahoma, and doing these shallow versus deep challenges. And it seems like, we're learning so much about that right now as far as both of us. I've sort of go into the areas that are traditionally shallow water, summertime areas. Johnny gets out offshore. We sort of compare the notes on that, and as it's worked out right now a little bit, it seems like the offshore has sort of outshined the shallow bite a little bit from what we've seen. That I'm really curious to see how, as the summer transitions and those deep fish start, to scatter out and move a little bit shallower, how long that Johnny can sustain that offshore bite. Because I remember back, when David Fritz was really at the top of his game, he would dominate offshore deep, even well into October, sometimes early November.
Mhm.
So, we're going to continue doing that, and we'll sort of see how it goes with that.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm not going to hold out for too much longer on the dominance offshore. I think that we're going to probably even out in August, September, and then skew your way in October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and I'm going to take my licks and maybe get my butt stomped a little bit, and then we'll get a little bit better in the summer. It'll be good though. I think either way, I'm not really too worried about it. I'm excited to actually just force myself to have to fish offshore in those different times of the year, like especially like on Grand Lake in January, February. There's not really that many fish, I don't think, that live that far off the bank that time of year. Maybe there's some deeper fish, but definitely not the numbers. There's a lot of suspended fish and shallow fish, so I think it's gonna be cool to see how that works.
Well, one of the things that surprised me, which I never would have tried, we were down at Table Rock filming in April,
Yeah.
or I mean, not filming. We were fishing down there in April, and the fish were on the beds, and Johnny was catching them suspended out over 30 foot of water on a swim bait, and I never would have tried that. I mean, the water's low 60s, the bass are all over the beds, and you're catching them over 30 foot of water suspended. So I mean, there may be an offshore bite all year long. It's just like that shows you how much I got to learn about fishing moving forward.
Yeah, for both of us. Okay, so I got everything squared away here. So I want to share with you guys some stuff that's going on fishthemoment.com. A couple things is that, one, I just opened up a new virtual seminar, which is another advanced bass fishing electronics class. It's going to be on Thursday, August 13th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it is basically a 3-hour seminar about how to maximize your results with your electronics. This is not going to be how to interpret side imaging, how to interpret down imaging. I've made a ton of videos on that on my channel. You can watch my playlists on that. But really what this is taking it to the next level of understanding bass behavior and linking up bass behavior with your electronics to determine, are bass catchable? What types of cover are the best in certain situations to hold fish and catch fish? What baits should you throw based on what you see on your fish finder? How do you actually go about graphing a spot to make sure you're hitting all of the different targets properly and making sure you're not missing any fish? All of the really advanced stuff that helps me consistently find fish offshore when I go fishing with Randy that isn't easy to cover in like a YouTube video because it takes a lot more long term. Like I need to talk for like 3-4 hours, build it up to kind of give you guys a full picture. It doesn't work in a 15-minute video. So that's why I've been doing these seminars, and I did one last month. We filled up all 30 people, and there's a bunch of people who didn't get to get in. So I would definitely recommend signing up as soon as you can. And it was an awesome class. There's a bunch of guys who can maybe talk about it in the live stream or talk about it in the comments of this video who attended, and everyone seemed to be very happy with it. So I'm excited about that. We also have some lake breakdowns that are new to the channel or new to the website, and Randy's actually going to start doing some personal map breakdowns where you can actually choose the lake that is broken down. We obviously have our seasonal map breakdowns, which are available, and we break down different lakes, major lakes across the country. And we're actually going to be switching over to fall maps soon, and we're actually going to publish a list of all of the maps we're planning on doing in the fall, and that way you'll know if your lake is going to get broken down or not. And that way you can, choose, okay, if your lake's not going to get broken down, Randy can do a personal breakdown, and he spends anywhere from 3 to 4 hours putting these together and puts a lot of time in. You care to speak on that a little bit, Randy?
Yeah, these breakdowns, they're very time consuming to put together because we're going in there and we're identifying 60 areas on every lake based upon the season. We're going to have them. We're going to have each season for every lake, across the countries. Spring, summer, winter, and fall. go in there, identify 60 areas. We basically, explain how to go about fishing these areas, bait recommendations for those particular areas based upon the season. And each map breakdown has got 4 areas on the lake that we key in on. And obviously, we can't cover the entire lake, but we key in on 4 areas that, what we feel are the prime spots for that particular season. And then we also give some advice on other parts of the lake that we don't cover. And even, maybe we talked about doing in the future, maybe say, for example, if we didn't cover the river arm in one lake, we may do a specific, map for a river arm. But, most all these lakes I've got experience on, I've got a lot of time, a lot of hours on them. And it's a really good tool as far as if you haven't been to the lake before, or even if you have. I mean, even if you fish the lake a lot, it's sort of some insight on from a tournament perspective on some areas that you may want to try. So it's pretty fun. I really enjoyed putting them together because it's when I'm putting these lake breakdowns together, it gets me thinking also, because I'm sitting there, putting these things together. I'm thinking about, man, this area right here is going to be really good in certain conditions. And that's another thing we do in the breakdown is we describe when these areas are best based upon like water levels, and different type of weather conditions. So a lot of information packed into these.
Yeah, and then we have a ton of maps available already, guys, on here. And so chances are, if you fish one of the major tournament lakes across the country, we have a map for you already. And the seasonal maps, they're available to everyone, and we sell them for $75. They come with 60 spots across 4 sections of the lake. And again, Randy puts a ton of time in to get these correct. And I have some that I've put on too. Some of these are actually ones I've done in the past myself, but most of them were done by Randy. And we also have, again, the personal maps because, we know that not every lake is going to be available. And these are going to be $150 because it's just for you. And you're actually going to have exclusive access to the lake, to the maps with the spots. And that's very helpful because you won't have anyone else behind the maps and going and fishing your spots. But also, really the key thing behind it is because if you have a smaller lake that's not going to be covered because it's not big enough or not like a big enough tournament destination, or we don't feel like enough people would buy the map, this is why we do this. And again, a little bit more expensive just because we only have one person buying it and it takes a ton of time to put them together. So that's that. And then we have some virtual lessons also that I give on the website. And I'm super booked out, guys, on these. And I've actually knocked it back to only doing 2 a week because I'm trying to put out more content. I'm actually trying to go to 4 to 5 YouTube videos a week plus the live stream. And as a result, I'm editing more and planning more and stuff like that. So I'm only doing 2 of these lessons a week. And you can see I'm already booked through September 21st, Randy. I'm almost booked all the way through September, and we're not even into August, which is crazy. So that's also another good reason to maybe do the personal breakdowns where Randy will break down these maps for you, because otherwise there's not really that much personalized instruction left on fishthemoment.com. I apologize. Anyways, good to see everyone on the stream, and just thanks again for all the support, checking out the YouTube videos, checking out the website, and helping me and Randy basically do this full time. And Randy's actually doing this now with me full time as well, which is awesome, as well as myself. And so we have 2 people that you guys are supporting, 2 fishermen full time based on your support just by watching the YouTube videos, purchasing the map breakdowns, doing the lessons. And then obviously we have people who support me on my Patreon page as well as through the Tackle Warehouse links. And let me actually pull this over here. If you guys do want to support the channel, you can go to fishthemoment.com, go to the support me or support Fish the Moment tab, and you can join our Patreon page and our Tackle Warehouse link. And anytime you use this link for Tackle Warehouse, we get a small cut of the profits. And that just helps us be able to literally go fishing like 3 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, make content, film it, edit it, and produce it for you guys. And just really appreciate all of the support to help us do this full time. So other than that, good to see you've got Tyler's Real Fishing on. What's up, Tyler? And a quick question from Dave. He says, does the lower unit on the outboard block the side scan imaging? It does. Actually, on my boat, my lower unit, if I don't trim my engine up like a quarter of the way, it will block a quarter of my screen, or half my screen. It blocks the left side of my screen. So whenever I'm graphing around with side imaging, if your transducer isn't mounted low enough, you have to actually trim up your engine. Otherwise, it'll literally just black out half your screen. That's very, very important. And I actually plan on getting my boat hooked up with some new transducers and stuff like this soon. And when I do that, I'm actually going to go over to the Bass Tank, which is over in Oklahoma, and have them talk about how to install side imaging and live scope and all this stuff properly, so you guys can get all of that figured out. Next question. Here's one for you, Randy. How does it play up shallow? Do graphs help at all when you are more or less casting at visible cover? So basically, do you use your graphs or your electronics at all when you fish up shallow, Randy?
Yeah, I use my 2D sonar most probably 95% of the time, because one of the things you want to look for when you're fishing shallow water is you need to be aware of the depth that you're fishing, because if you're fishing down just a stretch of bank that's got whatever type of cover on it, there's certain sections of that bank that may be a little bit deeper, a little bit shallower, maybe some siltation on certain areas, or maybe little washouts in certain areas. And sometimes just those little subtle depth changes can really help a lot. And also, I haven't got it done myself, but I know that a lot of the guys that my friends are using the 360 mega imaging. You can really scan out in those really shallow areas, particularly if you're fishing shallow flats, and identify a lot of cover that's off the bank with that as well, which you can do that with side imaging too. But if I'm fishing shallow targets, yeah, I keep an eye on my depth finders a lot. But in a tournament, once that I know what's there, I usually turn them off, because I want to be as stealthy as I can in really shallow water.
Yeah, that's really good tips. And one thing with the electronics I've been experimenting with recently is, if I go fishing a spot for a second time, like a lot of times when I go fishing with Randy or whatever, I'm going to drive my boat over the top of these offshore areas, graph them before I fish them, see the fish on the graph, spin around and cast on them. And that's great when you are not sure if the fish are there or not, and you want to determine, are there fish in that area. But I know that in the past, when I used to fish a lot of tournaments when I was in my teens and early 20s, which I'm still in my early 20s, but when I was 21, 3 years ago, I found that I would catch more fish offshore when I didn't graph over these offshore areas, and I would actually turn the transducers on my boat off. So I would just run the mapping. I wouldn't have my transducers running at all if I knew where the fish were. So I didn't have any extra noise pulsing in the water or that transducer ticking. I would try to run my trolling motor as little as possible, and I found that did help me get a lot more bites, especially on these pressured schools of fish that I would find. And I would also throw very unique baits on them. And it's very difficult to do that if you're just fishing for fun. And it's also kind of a double-edged sword, because a lot of times if you don't graph an area before you fish it, you'll have no idea if the fish are there or not. And so a lot of times you're casting on nothing. So a lot of times what I'll do is make 5 to 10 casts on the spot, maybe 15. If I don't get bit, I leave, or I'll graph over it as I leave to make sure the fish are still there. So hopefully that makes sense. Do you turn your electronics off completely in tournaments in general when you're fishing shallow, Randy, or do you keep them on ever when you're in tournaments?
If I can get away with it, I always like to turn them off. I mean, a transducer ping is really loud underwater, coming off the trolling motor, and I know that's got to have some effect on them. So if I don't feel that turning that locator off is not going to hurt, my ability to miss out on something, I always turn them off. But if I need it, as far as if I've got to be aware of maybe some shallow grass or some type of subtle breaks or something, I'll leave it on. But I prefer the stealth approach. Electronics off, trolling motor noise to a minimum, in the boat movements to a minimum, just to be as quiet as you can.
Awesome. Now I completely agree with that too, and I need to do that more. I don't do that enough, for sure. So we're going to get in a bunch of questions here. They're just basic about offshore fishing. So Peyton asks, how do you fish for bass in deep water? Another question is, what sensitivity and contrast do you use in your hummingbird side imaging? That's from Hot Looks. There's a bunch of questions about offshore fishing guides that I get all the time, and I just highly recommend that if you want to learn more about your bass fishing electronics or offshore fishing, just go to Fish Moment YouTube channel, go to the playlist tab, and you'll be able to find my offshore fishing master playlist that tells you everything you know about offshore fishing. Literally, it'll get you 75% of where you need to be offshore fishing wise. And I have videos that are 30 minutes long and I have like 25 30-minute videos. It's better than Bass University, anything you can pay for, and it's free on the internet. Go there, or just go to my Fish Finder and Sonar master playlist. I have like 18 videos explaining everything you know about the basics of side imaging, down imaging, how to interpret it, how to set up your fish finders, and for how it looks. Just type in Fish the Moment Sonar settings or Fish Finder settings. There's a video that I've done that explains exactly how to do it. I have my exact settings I use on all the different brands of units. And another question is the average angler, when fishing offshore, how do you modify your approach when dealing with a thermocline? Again, just type in Fish the Moment thermocline. I have a video on it. I have a video on everything, guys. Like literally, I've been doing this now for 4 years. Every basic topic on offshore fishing, I have a video on it. How to hit offshore targets with a fish finder, or like how to hit offshore targets using a fish finder and a marker buoy and stuff like that. Got it all. So, other than that, another question. There's a bunch of sonar questions, guys. If you want to get more information answered about fishing electronics too, again, check out my Fish Finder playlist, or also you can sign up for that Fish the Moment sonar class, the advanced sonar class. That will help a ton as well. But let's see here. Oh, here's a good question for Bobby. He says, I would imagine you have had a lot of experience finding fish before graphs got so good. How would you find fish without a graph right now? Randy, how would you find fish right now without a fish finder?
Well, obviously, you're going to be a lot more efficient if you can fish shallow water with that. If you don't have a depth finder, or if you've got a really, inexpensive unit, just focus on shallow water. I mean, there's a shallow water bite all year long. It doesn't matter where you go. Every single lake in the country has it. And, as far as like success ratio on that, every tournament, I've never fished a tournament ever in my life where there at least wasn't a couple anglers that finished in the top 10 or 20 fishing shallow, even on a lake that everybody else dominates deep. So don't even try to fish deep water. Just head to that shallow water, fish targets, fish visible structure, and, you can still catch them.
Yeah, and even if you don't have a really nice fish finder, you can catch fish offshore. I mean, Randy, you used to catch them offshore with triangulation and with drafting around with a flasher, right?
Yeah, that's all we had up until not too long ago, really. I mean, even 20 years ago or so. I mean, that was just the state of the art unit back then.
And, I'm actually making a video this week or for next week about how to find fish without a fish finder offshore. And one thing that's really nice, Randy, is we have a lot of nice mapping available to us now. There's literally Navionics web app that's free to everyone with all the Navionics maps with high detail that you can just get for free on the internet. Plus, you can get the Navionics web app on your phone, the Navionics app, for $10, and you can actually get GPS on your smartphone with the maps. So how helpful would that have been in the early 2000s if you could have, or even the 90s, if you could just have a GPS with mapping? I mean, that would be a game changer.
That Navionics web app, I mean, that is one of the best learning tools any angler can have for any lake that they fish. Because, I mean, you can mentally pre-fish a lake or mentally practice a lake and learn so much just off of maps, as far as, just giving you a mental picture on where you need to start at, how you need to run the lake. I mean, that's one of the things I would suggest to everybody. Spend a lot of time on this Navionics web app because it's a great learning tool.
Yeah, and like when I started fishing offshore, I was like an early adopter of the Navionics maps when I was like 13, 14. And I was finding a ton of fish on lakes all over my area just by looking at Navionics mapping. And I kind of early on understood what a ledge looked like, what a hump looks like, the different types of structure offshore. And I wouldn't even know how to read a fish finder. I would literally just have the Navionics GPS on my map, and I would just pull up on like a random offshore point that looked good, like a drop off, and just start throwing a football jig and a crankbait out there, and I would catch 4 and 5 pounders like crazy. And I never even saw the fish on my fish finder for the first 7 years I was doing it. Like, I literally was just randomly fishing, it seemed like. And I was using the mapping to tell me where the fish were going to be. And I was treating my fishing offshore like I was fishing up shallow. Where, when fishing up shallow, I just pick up a crankbait and a jig and we just fish visible targets and fish down the bank. Well, when I was fishing offshore, I would just find the contour lines, and I would just follow the boat with my GPS, either on my phone or on the GPS on my boat, and I would just follow it and just cast down the ledges, and that's it. That's literally all I would do. I wouldn't graph them. I wouldn't know there were fish there. And once I found a fish, I drop a marker buoy, and I keep casting the same spot and catching them. So it's possible. It's just more efficient to do it with electronics, obviously, but it's definitely doable. Would you agree, Randy?
That's old school. That's how we used to do it all the time. I mean, there wasn't any other way to fish except that. And you can probably even fishing like that, you can probably pick up fish that you'd probably miss or not even give a chance with electronics. I mean, but yeah, man, for so long, that's just the way it was. You get on a main river ledge and you just go until you found them. I mean, crank all day long till you hit a wad of them accidentally.
Yep, for sure. That's how I learned how to do it myself.
Yeah.
A couple questions here. One from John. He says, "Is there a depth that is too deep to look for bass?" In the summertime, there's something called the thermocline, which is basically going to limit how deep the fish will go. Just type in "fish the moment thermocline" explained into YouTube. Watch that video; it'll answer that question perfectly. And then another question would be, where was that? There was a question here. Oh, from Cam. He says, "Do either of you fish flutter spoons?" I actually made a complete guide to flutter spoons last week. It's on my YouTube channel. Type in "fish the moment flutter spoons." I feel like at this point, people are just asking me Google questions, and I'm like Johnny Google right now for fish the moment Google. So just if you guys have questions about specific techniques and stuff, just before you ask, type "fish the moment" and whatever your question is, you will find a video on it, almost guaranteed. So I'm just to save time there. One question here is a really good one, is from Robert. When do you decide it's time to move from deep to shallow or vice versa? Randy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that a lot of it is environmental conditions because it can have something to do with the wind that you have, water level, water visibility, that type of stuff. Most of the time, when you're talking about a lake that has a shallow and deep bite going on at the same time, excuse me, excuse me, um, you can just make a commitment to one or the other and figure those fish out. But for the most part, from what I've seen, if you have an environmental condition where the weather is really stable, the water clarities are normal, and everything is pretty much right on line, you can continue to catch those fish deep. But, if you have a water clarity change, like you lose your visibility, if the water, suddenly rises a lot, if you get a strong wind, something like that, that's usually when I'll move shallow if I've been catching them off the bank. So it's a lot of it just depends on the situation, when you're out on the water.
For sure.
And the same with shallow too. I mean, your shallow water bite can deteriorate a lot of times. Sometimes, say if you're catching them in the back of a creek or cove, get a heavy rain one night, it muddies that water up, those fish turn off. And then the deep water main lake, that didn't affect the water clarity there, and you can still catch them out there. So, every situation is unique to that.
For sure. And one thing I say is, if you're fishing in the summertime and you have 2 foot of water visibility or more in your lake, you can catch them offshore. And what I always do is, if I'm not catching them offshore, I don't actually switch to go fish shallow. I just change the section of the lake I'm in. I'll run 3-4 miles up the lake, or run up a different river arm, or run up a different section of the lake and look there, as opposed to switching, because I love to fish offshore. And at the same time, if I'm trying to fish up shallow and I'm on the lower end of the lake where the water is kind of clear, I might not switch between fishing shallow and fishing offshore. I'll run to a new section of the lake and run to some dirtier water, run further up the creeks, run to a new part of the lake, and continue fishing up shallow. And a lot of times you can catch more fish that way, as opposed to changing from one style to another. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yeah, definitely so. Because I mean, depending upon the lake you're at, you can have a completely different type of cover or water clarity or anything like that based upon where you're at on the lake. And having an understanding on where those clarity changes take place, where the rock compositions change, where the bank angles change, that all factors into your decision making on what part of the lake to be in.
For sure. Question from Jenny. She says, "Husband and I are trying to prep for a night tournament on Grand Lake launching out of Wolf Creek. We are new to the area of Grand and to night fishing. Any tips? Actually, I'll just, and hopefully none of your competitors are watching. I'll just give you a spot that you can go catch like 3 or 4 4-pounders if you want that night. Launch out of Wolf Creek boat ramp right here. Run up, and before you get out of Wolf Creek right here, you'll be able to see on the map there's these little humps right here. This little ledge right here, the last time I fished it, I caught a 4 1/4 and like a 3.5 pounder right here, and I fished it for like 20 minutes. You can pull up there most likely right now and catch them. And the bait I would be throwing is a 1/2 ounce spinner baits, nighttime spinner. Let's see if I can find something. A black spinnerbait. There we go. Like a black single Colorado bladed spinnerbait. Go throw that. It's shallow up on top of those rocks, and just slowly bump that thing like a 1/2 or 3/4 ounce all black spinnerbait over the top of that at night. And right before it gets dark, throw like a football jig or like a crankbait over top of it. You might win the tournament there. There's a lot of fish right there right now. Any other tips, Randy, other than that?
Yeah, I'll definitely give you a good nighttime spot at Grand. If you run down the lake towards the dam, you'll go past what's called Drowning Creek, and if you go past Drowning Creek a couple miles, the the main lake has a lot of gravel banks on it with boat docks, and a bunch of these docks have metal railings go down. They go down into the water. There's like dozens and dozens of these metal railings that go into the water. Those bass at night will get on those metal railings, and there's some light coming off the dock so you can see a little bit. And you can go down there and take a spinnerbait, Texas rig worm, jig, fish those railings, and do pretty good.
Good stuff. Solid. So basically, you just got really good info right there. That is fresh info, and then also years of experience info. So if you don't win that tournament, Randy and I will be disappointed, Jenny. Anyways, so another question here is Bobby again asked, before I heard you say on the say you concentrate on the channel this time of year, so would you not do that without a graph right now? Basically, do you focus always on like the deeper, steeper banks, like the channel swing banks, stuff like that in the summer, Randy, or are there times when you wouldn't do that, where you would just go fish flats and super shallow water?
Well, when you're talking about shallow water summer fishing, the way that I fish shallow in the summer is I'm either fishing the extremities of the river or extremities of the main creeks. And when you get in that water, right before the actual end of the lake or the end of the creek, there's always a channel bank. And opposite of that channel bank, there's always a flat. On every creek, every lake you go to that's man-made, you got a channel side, you got a flat side. If you have shallow cover on that flat, like if you have some type of wood cover in like 2 to 3 foot of water, that's where you want to fish. But if you don't have much cover on the flat side of the lake, you want to concentrate on that channel side, particularly if it's not real deep. Like if your boat's setting in 10 foot of water and you're maybe 5 or 6 feet off the bank. But normally that last channel bank in a creek before it gets really shallow is really good in the summer, and out in the mud flat itself is good if you have some type of isolated wood cover, which you do in most lakes. It's pretty typical.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. That's not that I'm an expert there. I'll just defer to Randy on that one. Let's see here. The lake I fish has a lot of fish out deep, but it's hard to find the bigger fish. Any tips? Honestly, in the summertime, especially if you're looking at like a Lake Norman or a lot of the deep, clear lakes that are in that kind of East Coast area, a lot of your bigger fish stay shallow in the summer. They'll chase brim brim around brim beds, and they'll stay up in like 2, 3, 4 foot of water, especially your big largemouth. You can catch a lot of spotted bass and stuff offshore, but a lot of your bigger largemouth will live shallow. There are bass that get in big brush piles, so if you're struggling to catch big fish, look for man-made brush piles on your lake. I'm sure that's probably where the bigger fish are, unless you're fishing a smallmouth lake. It's very hard to say, but any tips there, Randy, on finding the bigger fish if you only find small ones out deep?
Yeah, for this time of year when you're fishing deep, this is probably the most difficult time of the year to catch big fish out like that. And it's just like what Johnny said, if you can find some type of hardcover brush, some type of thicker structure, that's where those bigger ones are going to be. You're very seldom going to catch big fish in the summertime suspended unless there's like a lot of timber in the lake where they suspend in the top. So, if you got deep brush, that's where you need to concentrate on.
Awesome. Let's see here. Terry, when or what do you do, or when do you know when you need to start transitioning to fall? Is there a certain water temp, time of year? When does that fall transition start?
Well, it's been my experience that the fall transition is something that occurs really slow. And, people think, well, like say the first, you know, big cold front that comes in where the water temperatures drop 3 or 4 degrees in a period of a couple of days is like going to trigger them. That's not really the case. It happens very slow, very methodically. A lot of it has to do with the water levels because normally in the fall time of the year, you have the waters are sort of gradually, falling and getting lower. Um, but like I said, it's something that happens over a period of about a month for the most part. And, probably the biggest thing that influences that fall transition is the daylight hours getting shorter in the fall, even more than the water temperatures falling, which is sort of the same in the spring for the opposite. But when you start having daylight hours get down, where it's starting to get darker, around 6:30, 7 o'clock, which for a lot of parts of the country, that's sort of like the late October. That's when you start seeing the most noticeable transition into the fall, where those fish are starting to get to the bank harder, particularly in the backs of the coves and the creeks more.
Yeah, and what I find and I agree with all that, Randy. And one thing I find is that fall transition for me on a lot of these lakes, especially down here in the south and like kind of central part of the United States, even out to the East Coast, is that fall transition can happen even when the air temperatures are 90 degrees and water temperatures are in the 80s. That those fish can start pushing back into the creeks and pushing back into the shallower water. And I was actually over in North Carolina on the lakes over in Raleigh, North Carolina, middle of September, and it was still like 100 degrees some of the days. I mean, it was hot, and it's not like there was any cold fronts that came through. We never had a day that was below like 65 degrees, but the fish and the bait fish were making a hard push into the backs of these creeks and the backs of these, I'm trying to find where we were, backs like the creeks, and they'd already turned the corner from the main lake back in the backs of the creeks, even in the middle of September when it was hot. And so a lot of times that fall transition, I've seen it happen as early as end of August, again, even when the water's really warm. So I find that the fall transition isn't dictated by like, you can't classify it to say fall transition is like a thing. What it is that the fall transition is basically the bait fish moving back into the creeks, which a lot of times happens when the lake turns over and air temperatures, all these factors that can dictate it. But what I do is I just look for where the shad are. If the majority of the shad in the lake are in the mouths of the creeks or halfway back in the creeks, that fall transition started, regardless of water temperature or air temperature. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yeah, definitely so. And the first thing that you'll notice with that is those fish move the quality fish, not just the fish in general, but the quality fish will move shallower than they've been in 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Even on the main lake. I mean, just like you said, if you have those threadfin and gizzard shad that are pushing up on the bank, pushing up on chunk rock banks, and those fish will move right up there with it once that water temperature starts to cool, even though it may be hot, like what you're talking about. If there's just like some subtle water temperature change, and the bait fish in the right spot, it's a real abstract thing. It's like, you know, everybody has got this preconceived notion in their head. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. That, yeah, in the fall time of the year, you got to fish the back ends of the creeks. That's just where they migrate. And yeah, that's true to some extent, but you can still catch them on the main lake all fall long if the bait's there, just like what Johnny said.
Awesome. Another question here from Derek. He says, do you feel like analytics in fishing is something people don't pay enough attention to? And for me, that is 100% yes. This is also coming from a manager at Nielsen, who I used to work for a data analytics company who got, like, my life was data for like a year and a half before I started this business, Fish of the Moment. And so I am a huge data nerd just in general. And what I find is that there are so many variables in fishing, and a lot of times when I always relate fishing, I'm going to make a video about this at some point, I need to. I relate fishing to demand forecasting. how, like, if you're in corporate, I used to do demand forecasting for DiGiorno pizzas for Nestle. So DiGiorno pizzas, you have to figure out how many people are going to buy DiGiorno pizza every single week across all the Walmart stores in the country. Well, there's all these factors that go into it: seasonality, events, like your weather, your past demand, the region of the country you're in, personal preference, all these different things. And we have a good grasp of that because we can capture that data and understand it. And all these companies like acquire and compound all this data together, and then we run heuristic models or we run like demand forecasts to determine how much demand is going to be generated at each of these stores. Well, fishing is the exact same way. If you can look at all the factors from the weather, time of day, the type of forage in the lake, the type of body of water, water clarity, water temperature, all these factors, you can bring all that information together and you can predict pretty well where the fish are going to be based on like heuristic modeling and stuff like that. And that's something that is super fascinating to me, and I'm doing something with that right now. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but there's something I'm doing with that. And it's going to be really, 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 really cool. But basically, that's just kind of teasing that out. And there's a lot of data out there in fishing that people just don't understand is relevant and is important. And it's hard to capture all of it yourself because you only have so many days to fish on the water. You can't deal with every condition on every lake all over the place. But data, the more data you can get, the more data points you can collect and start to kind of link them together and understand how one change in water level affects a fish or how the air temperature going up and down affects a fish. It will make you a way better fisherman. That's all I'm going to say. What are your thoughts on that, Randy?
Yeah, and that's especially important to get started because, I mean, by basically assimilating as much data as you can, or data.
It doesn't either way.
That gives you a starting point to, like, when you go out in the water, you have sort of a game plan in your mind. And that is so important because one of the most overwhelming things for a lot of anglers, particularly anglers that are just getting started out in the sport, is they get overwhelmed about where do I need to be fishing or what do I need to be doing or what lures do I need to be fishing. But if you can take some of that data and put it together where you can have a starting point, then once you get out of the water, you can modify it because if something's working, that's great. You can run it and you keep exploiting that a little bit. If it's not working, you can make some modifications. But, it gives you that starting point where you can have something to work from right off the bat.
Completely agree. Last question here from Living Missouri Outdoors. Question is, Randy, I have an old color selector unit. Which is most important to color, the water temperature or the pH? I know what they're talking about, but I feel like you have the expertise there.
I had one of those color selectors years ago, man. Back then, that was back like you're talking like 35 years ago. That color selector, man, that was everybody thought you had to have one there, and all the pros. I remember seeing pictures of Basil Bacon with this color selector in back of his hand, these commercials, and like that made me go out and buy one. But I think that pH, there's a lot of other things far more important than pH. Obviously, water temperature is, I think, in my opinion, it's a lot more important as far as determining how you want to fish. But I've never seen a situation where somebody said that pH was the key to fish being there or not. So, yeah, pay more attention to your water temperatures and other variables because I think bass are pretty adaptable as far as pH levels go.
That's good stuff. Randy, I don't know why, but I only have one memory of Basil Bacon, and it's from like a 1989 Bassmaster Open or Bassmaster Top 150 on Grand Lake, and he was fishing on Grand Lake with a 3/4 ounce single Colorado blade spinnerbait. This is when you had the hand kick trolling motors, and he was fishing he was roll casting with a pistol grip with a cigarette in his mouth, and he was kicking the foot control trolling motor, roll casting and burning a spinnerbait. And I don't know how he was controlling the trolling motor, his rod, and his cigarette, but he was doing it all at once. And then he catches a fish and he gets the net, so he has the net, a rod, foot control trolling motor, keeping him away from the dock, and a cigarette in his mouth. And like ever since then, like Basil Bacon, he is a legend to me. That just from that maneuver.
usually a cup of coffee at the same time. I love Basil. I've known Basil forever, and he was one of the original pioneers of flipping. And back in the early '80s, I mean, he dominated the sport flipping. This was back when like it just started out, when like Dave Glebe and D. Thomas, the old school flipping, and Basil won several Bassmaster tournaments flipping way back in the day, and almost won the Bassmasters Classic
Yep.
in '79, I believe it was.
I
But
don't
yeah,
know the year,
he's
but I
still
remember
in
the
Springfield,
classic.
in the town I live in, so he's just right down the road.
Yeah, man, Basil Bacon. I remember as a kid I was like fascinated with Basil Bacon. I would always look for him in the my dad was awesome. He used to get all the shows, the Bassmaster shows. He found a guy on eBay who had them all, and he would like send him the discs. The guy would send him all of them, and so I have every Bassmaster show, like classics, everything back to like 1982, like every show possible. And I don't know how this guy recorded them. He had them all on like VHS tapes and then transferred them to a DVD. So I watched all these shows. So like I remember the old color selectors. I remember all this stuff just from when I watched it when I was like, I don't know, like 12, 13 years old. And I've watched every show like 15 times. So that also helps, guys. Honestly, like if you want to get better at bass fishing, watch more bass fishing television shows. Specifically, watch the Bassmasters. There's a whole catalog on Bassmaster.com. Actually, let me show you this. This is really cool. I don't think a lot of people know this, that you can find this. Let me go here. I'm going to show this here. I think I can find this. Yeah. Okay, so we're on Bassmaster.com. Just go to Bassmaster.com, go to Watch, and then go to the TV Elite shows. And if you go here, don't do that. I don't need to get copyright claim. But if you go here, there are 165 Elite Series shows, and they have everything from like the new ones on like Lake 10 Killer and stuff from 2019. But you can also go to like the old shows from like 2009, and then there's also the old guy. There's some other guys on here. There's some guys who have like the really old shows on YouTube. Watch all these shows. They're so good, and they have a lot of great information. And I mean, look at this. You got Skeet Reese with a Fu Manchu mustache and a shaved head. I mean, come on, that is classic Skeet Reese. You got Bill Lowen here fishing on California Yellow, and then Skeet's got his hair grown out. I mean, this is classic stuff. John Cruz freaking out on the Delta. Like, these are good shows. You need to watch this stuff. And, I mean, you have, you got the Byron Velvick hand-lining in fish from 50 feet away from the boat. Like, just classic memories here, but also a lot of good info on fishing. So go watch those shows. There's 165 hours of bass fishing, and they tell you exactly where these guys are fishing, all their techniques. It's so valuable, and I don't think guys use that resource enough. They'll watch new YouTube videos like my YouTube videos, but they don't go back and watch the old stuff, and that's how I learned to fish, is off those TV shows. Agree with that, Randy?
Oh, no doubt. I could sit and watch those things for hours, man, because it's like there's just so many personalities and characters, and you can learn so much because nobody's hiding anything with that. And if you're a historian for the sport like I am, I mean, I've got a true love for the sport and, the history of it, where it came from, and, to go back and watch those old shows. I go back and watch like the 70s Bassmasters Classic, like 73, 74. I mean, that is some cool stuff.
That's awesome. The shotgun starts. That's like you got a taste of that when you were on the Kerr fishing that lock out of Kerr where there's 150 boat shotgun start out of the lock.
That's crazy stuff.
It's awesome. And we'll, guys, we're probably going to wrap it up here. I do want to kind of talk about a couple things there on the website, maybe if you guys missed it. So the new virtual seminar up, it's the Advanced Bass Fishing Electronics class. There are 30 spots available, and I'm going to be doing a 3-hour seminar August 13th, Thursday, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., and we're talking about how to actually go about taking your electronics and catching fish with them, not just interpreting the sonar and like how to read down imaging, how to read side imaging, settings, stuff like that. I cover that in all my YouTube videos. This is specifically about how to identify if fish are catchable on your fish finder, what baits to throw, what type of cover is going to be productive on a given day, what depth of water should you be looking in, how to graph structure, what types of elements do you need to be looking for to get big fish versus small fish, all these things. And I'll be talking about all that in this class. I filled up the last seminar I did like last month. All 30 spots filled up, and a lot of people missed out. So I know there's people who want to sign up for this again, and so I'm opening it back up. I'm going to be doing more virtual seminars coming up. We also have some personal map breakdowns that Randy's going to be doing for the website. You can choose your lake, and it'll be a personalized map breakdown for you with 60 spots on the lake across 4 different areas, and really good tool. There's only 4 available every week. I restock them every single Monday on the site, so that's all we have time for because they take like 4 hours to make. So 4 a week, that's what we're doing. Also going to be putting out a new fishing lure with Jewel Bait Company, and that's going to be launching on July 31st on Friday. I'm going to be doing a lot of teasers for that bait, and basically we're going to be kind of doing an unveil of it over the next few days, and Randy's fished with it. I've fished with it for like 9 months now, and it's an offshore bait that's going to change the game for you guys. I'm really excited about it, and so we announced a partnership on that today. So that's great. Randy's going to be joining me going forward with all the podcasts, live streams, and YouTube videos. We're filming a bunch together, so just a ton of awesome stuff coming to Fish in the Moment, and we're excited to have you on board here, Andy.
Yeah, and like I said, I just closed, and I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in, because I mean we don't take it for granted, everybody tuning in and following these videos and listening to the podcast. It's a big deal for us, for y'all to be part of this, and just know that we really appreciate that, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining the stream. Thanks, Randy, for helping me out on all this stuff. And there's a bunch of comments we didn't get to, guys. We'll catch you on the next live stream. We're going to be doing these every Tuesday night so that you guys can ask us questions, hear our thoughts on different topics. We kind of started out with something a little bit controversial today. We got into a lot of philosophical stuff. We did some breakdowns of lakes. We went into the history. We got everything. This is like the live stream. If you like fishing, there's a little bit of everything in here for you. And so hopefully everyone enjoyed. If you do, hit the like button as you leave the stream. Just close out the window. Go down and hit the like button. It would really help us out. And if you're not subscribed, and if there's 315 of you on here right now, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, go subscribe. You just need a Gmail account, and it's free to sign up. Subscribe to the channel. You can get notified of when our streams are coming up. And we're also going to be putting out like 4 to 5 videos every single week going forward, so you don't want to miss any of that content. And subscribing just helps us improve our video content, helps us put out more content, and grow our audience. So really appreciate that. So other than that, thanks again for tuning in to the live stream tonight, guys, and we'll see you guys next week. See ya.